Why is it that we wouldn't settle for a doctor diagnosing our serious illnesses over the phone? Why is it that we wouldn't settle for a commercial pilot taking us abroad without having had a shot in an airplane as a practice run? So why do we think that a bunch of privately educated politicians with very limited social experience can devise social policy from behind closed doors according to their own narrow interests? And ultimately that is the serious question at the root of it. But it also looks at the problem we have with the electorate in the UK in terms of you have, despite proclamations about values that unite us across classes, you have groups in society whose interests are so divergent now due to social inequality that ultimately the more electorally lucrative demographics are kind of steering the ship in terms of policy direction. And unfortunately, due to their increasingly narrow social experience, the sort of action that they demand often in areas like education, criminal justice, which they regard as common sense, actually just suit their interests, and they don't port very well to communities where people don't have much to conserve. And the book really takes that idea and applies it to education, the labour market, criminal justice, property, land, immigration, and then cultural issues like meritocracy or this idea of deference. You know, how we sort of somewhere deep down, even now, there's a deep, deep part of us that thinks maybe Boris Johnson will be capable of something in the end, even though our eyes and ears tell us that is an impossibility. There is a kind of deference that we're socialised into acquiring at some point. And then the second part of the book is a number of essays, I would probably call them, which apply the theme of proximity to conservatives, the radical left, populism and centrism, Blairism essentially, and draws out some of the areas where those ideologies let people down.
I mean, you write with passion and with panache about the problem you just described, which is, you know, how can someone from that kind of background who has no idea of the lived experience of people who are dealing on a daily basis with nerve-shredding insecurity. But you don't just deal with that. I mean, you deal with a lot of other structural things, such as, I mean, for instance, you know, the two-edged sword of digital technology. We've just been hearing about that. But how do you think digital technology has impacted that question of distance?
It's massive. I mean, we're going through an industrial revolution, essentially. And except rather than working class people driving it, you know, many are going to become surplus to requirements. And so what do you do then? So the advantages of a digital revolution are obvious, but like many of the advantages that we see around other areas, for example, like immigration, they're not evenly spread. And so you have a pocket of the population that doesn't really perceive the benefits, because what they're being overexposed to are the negative impacts. And this means that, you know, as big data and technology renders possibly entire sectors of the economy obsolete in the end, what happens to those people? And then in education, you have issues where other children are racing ahead who grow up in, or are parachuted into wealthy catchment areas. The grades inflate the house prices inflate the grades. This creates a cycle of prosperity which is confined to specific postcodes. And part of the advantage enjoyed in those postcodes and in those households is dual income families with secure incomes who can afford to pay for extra tuition, who have more autonomy over their working hours and thus can spend more time with their children. And generally there's a lower stress level in the household and in the community generally and in the educational environment. Part of that is because they have access to digital technology, the internet, they become very fluent in that language. Then you've got kids who are going to school and it's in the school maybe the first time they've interfaced with one of these devices. Beyond just entertainment. And so obviously a ravine is going to open up there eventually.